The bottom line is this. You cannot conceive of a nation without a strong, secure border. Congress in 1976 passed the National Emergencies Act and gave the president the authority, as a result of that, to invoke a national emergency in many different circumstances, but among them for the use of military construction funds. If the president were to say we're going to use military construction funds to, say, increase the perimeter around a base in Bagram, around a base in Syria, nobody would even say anything about it.
Stephen Miller, White House advisor with Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, defending the national emergency declaration. Now the lawsuits stack up against the plan. Alan Dershowitz joins me now. He wrote the book, The Case Against the Democratic House Impeaching Trump. How you doing, sir? Good morning to you and welcome back. What do you think about the legal standing for this? Let's start with that and then we'll go from there.
Well, I think it's very questionable. Emergency generally means something that happens so quickly that there isn't time for Congress to act. I don't think an emergency includes a failure by the branch of government that's authorized to expend funds, namely the House of Representatives and the Congress, to authorize funds that the president wants to see authorized, and they refuse to do it. I don't think that's an emergency, and I think Congress does have the authority to vote to amend the law that was cited in the previous discussion to make it clear that it doesn't apply to failure to authorize expenditures. Of course, the president could then veto, and you'd need to have a veto-proof majority. Will that happen? I don't know. But Congress, many members of Congress, including Republicans, are upset at what they believe is a presidential power grab over the legitimate power of Congress to authorize expenditures of money for long-term problems, not problems that suddenly appear on the horizon.
I got to follow up on that, but first back to Stephen Miller about that whole thing about disapproval that could be treated with a veto. Watch here from Wallace and Miller.
If they pass a resolution of disapproval, will the president veto that, which would be the first veto of his presidency?
Obviously, the president is going to protect his national emergency declaration, Chris. And I know that we're out of time, but again, I want to make this point. There's no threat.
So, yes, he will veto?
He's going to protect his national emergency declaration, guaranteed.
So we'll see where that goes, and we'll keep our powder dry until that happens, Professor. However, you have all this money that you can access. Maybe not all of it, because you will get a legal fight on some of it. But you've got access to a lot of money now that would allow you to continue the border security plan, whether there is a legal fight or not, sir.
Yeah, and I think what's going to happen is you're going to have some district courts striking down at least some parts of the emergency provision and the expenditures. Others may uphold it, and then it's going to make its way to the Supreme Court. The real question is what happens in the meantime. If the courts grant the stay, they're basically saying there's no emergency, because if there's an emergency, you don't grant the stay. And if they grant the stay, it's their way of saying there's no emergency. But eventually you'll get to the Supreme Court. There are 2 new justices on the Supreme Court. We don't know how Justice Roberts will vote on an issue like this. So it's really unpredictable whether the president will ultimately prevail or not prevail. I think the key question is whether the lower courts will grant the stay, and if they do, whether the Supreme Court would uphold the stay or vacate the stay, because that really tells you what they think about whether this is an emergency. If the case takes 6 months or a year, obviously that's a message that says there's nothing emergent about this. There's not an emergency here. This is something that should be done in the ordinary course of events.
Yeah, back to my point, though. What Stephen Miller said is that we will see a couple hundred miles by middle 2020, 2 years from now, thereabouts, meaning that you can access some of that money. Now, quickly on the McCabe thing from last night in 60 Minutes, you know, a lot of contrails from that story again today. Here's Rush Limbaugh with Wallace on Sunday and how he sees it.
The Washington game, we're losing sight of what happened here. People unelected simply because they don't like a guy's hairstyle or like where he came from decided the American people's decision was invalid and began a systematic process to get him thrown out of office. This is a silent coup. These guys, if you ask me, ought to be the ones in jail. This is one of the greatest political hoaxes that has ever been perpetrated on the people of this country.
Yeah. When I was watching that story
first of all,
let me just get to the question here. I found a lot of...
Sure.
I didn't find a lot of facts, sir. I found a lot of comments and the appearances with the Russian diplomats in the Oval Office. I see where McCabe was coming from on the red flags, but I was looking for facts. Did you find them last night in the piece as it was laid out on CBS?
No, I don't see facts. I don't agree with Rush Limbaugh that this is about a person's hairstyle. This is a serious issue. I think McCabe and Rod Rosenstein really believed that the president had obstructed justice. I think they were wrong, but they honestly believed it, and they were looking for a way, short of impeachment, to remove him from office. I think that there ought to be hearings. I think that people ought to be put under oath and cross-examined as to precisely how serious was the discussion about the 25th Amendment. Look, I think any law enforcement official who thinks that the 25th Amendment operates in a case like this is disqualified from serving in government. I don't want to put him in jail. Too many people are saying that too many people should go to jail. I don't want to criminalize political differences on either side, but there ought to be hearings, and we ought to get to the truth as to how serious Rosenstein was. Did he actually think about, plan about wearing a wire? Did he actually speak to or consider speaking to cabinet members, getting their approval for the invoking of the 25th Amendment? That would be a serious movement toward an unconstitutional coup d'etat, and I hope that didn't happen, but we need to find the truth.
He said they were counting up votes in the cabinet, but when pressed on that, he gave no detail. Sir, thank you for your time. It's good to have you back on. We're out of time today. Alan Dershowitz, thanks.
Thank you.
You bet.